Hello again, everybody. It's nice to have everyone back. Hope that you had a nice lunch break. Just a reminder, my name is Gary Anderson. I have the fortune to serve as the NAIC CEO. And a warm welcome to those of us joining virtually as well. Welcome. I thought we had a really nice start to the conference this morning when we heard from Ms. Chandler about knowing ourselves, the impact that we have on each other, which encourages us to take an opportunity here this week to learn and grow, the whole purpose of the summit. So as we continue on that journey of learning and growing, today we're really lucky to be joined by three of our NAIC officers, and I would say the three of them are great examples of really important leaders, good leaders in their states here at the NAIC, who each recognize the importance of investing in today, in individuals that impact the insurance regulation across the states, and that of tomorrow. And maybe before I introduce each of them on stage, I'd mentioned earlier there is something about this forum of the NAIC, and I think a special sauce to that is us gathering and the opportunity to get to know each other. And I think about, as I was contemplating sitting up here on stage with each of our three officers, my own interaction, my first interaction or some subsequent interactions with each of them over the years, and how these are little small examples of the relationships that we build, how unique our community is. Ms. Chandler earlier this morning talked about some of the chaos or the consternation that's going on, and I think about just how unique our organization is in bringing us all together. To sit in the room together, we mentioned having a breakfast together with somebody new or a lunch with somebody new and getting to know somebody from a different state or a territory and learning from them or sharing something that you've learned with them. This is something that I have valued in my decade-plus experience coming to and participating in this forum that we call the NAIC. So I'm really happy to introduce three of our officers, but also three of my friends. I think about, when I first started at the NAIC over a decade ago, and some of the first people that I ran into, and you couldn't ignore them if you tried because they're not quiet, is the Rhode Island crew. and Director Dwyer and Beth and her team that just took me in as somebody new, and they had some experience in this world. I have valued that, and just over my tenure, I've been valued. It is invaluable. And I think about Commissioner Godfrey, John, and something that came to mind was, we have the DC fly-in and we have the DC forum, and there was a weekend in between there where we both decided to stay in DC and we became Potomac pals. That's what we curated over ChatGPT, yeah. Right? And Scott and I, Commissioner White and I, and the travels that we've had internationally, and think about all the places that we've been in. And oftentimes those are really intense negotiations when you're working with our colleagues overseas on some really important matters. But one thing that came to mind was a hotel that we often stay at, and there's this little bar, and we'd often sit down for a drink at the end of a long day and have a glass of beer together and just kind of go through what happened that day and have a few laughs over a beer. That is, to me, as I said, a special part of who and what we are. So that you all are participating in that, we're really grateful that you're here. Really grateful for each of them, and I'll introduce, as I said, these three officers and my three friends. NAIC President John Godfrey, who is also the Commissioner of the North Dakota Insurance Department. NAIC President-elect Scott White, who is the Commissioner of the Virginia Bureau of Insurance. And NAIC Vice President Beth Dwyer, Director of the Rhode Island Department of Business Regulation. And we'd just like to mention the other officer, John Pike, who's the NAIC Secretary-Treasurer and Commissioner of the Utah Insurance Department. he was not able to join us because he had another commitment. But with that, why don't we kick it off if you guys are ready. I would say the challenges of today seem a little daunting. We heard this morning some of the stuff that we're dealing with kind of just globally outside of insurance, but also with insurance, topics like artificial intelligence and natural disasters, rising healthcare costs. But looking at the room and knowing how many people have also joined us online, I think probably inspires us with a little bit of confidence that so many of you are taking steps today that will safeguard our future. So as you think about this, and I'll open this one up to the group, maybe we'll start with you, John. What does the conference theme, Safeguarding Tomorrow Starts Today, mean to you, and why is that important for all of us?
Yeah, well, Gary, thanks, and number one, thanks everybody for being here, taking the time to do this, and even those virtually as well. It's about being ready for tomorrow, right? I mean, it's about things are changing at a pace that I don't think we've necessarily seen in just about every sector of this industry. There's an evolution going on. I think when I first came on as elected commissioner in North Dakota 9-10 years ago, the P&C market was pretty sleepy, pretty easy. It's like, okay, we don't have to worry about that, but healthcare was kind of a challenge. And now it's really everything's a challenge. And that's one of the great things about this job is that there's something different every day, but it's also one of the potentially exhausting things about this job is there's a fire everywhere all the time. And so I think that's kind of the theme we've been trying to embody this year as leadership and kind of, again, preparing for tomorrow. And I'll tell you, your involvement and your engagement in conferences like this and meetings like this mean an awful lot to all of us up here. I can't speak for Scott and Beth, but there's over 10,000 state regulators that wake up every day to safeguard our markets, right? And we get to carry that banner, whether it's domestically with the federal government, internationally with our international partners, and it's really the work that you all do that we get to rely upon and really celebrate. And so I can't thank you enough for digging in and expanding your knowledge base and really digging into this process and in this industry because it is so fundamentally important. I'm a big believer in the state-based system. The state-based system doesn't work without smart, intelligent, and engaged regulators. And putting on a conference like this and having the attendance and the turnout that we've got, again, really gives us, I think, a shot in the arm and some confidence that when we go out and talk about the state-based system, we talk about the 56 jurisdictions across the country that we have that are operating through the NAIC and in coordination. It's you all are the foundation of that. It's the work that's being done in the departments on a day-to-day basis, monitoring and safeguarding the system that allow us to go out and celebrate that system and talk about it. So just a big thank you for being here, a big thank you for engaging and digging in, and it's an honor to get to kind of tell the story of what we're doing at the NAIC and across the country.
Thanks, Commissioner Godfrey. Commissioner White, please.
Yeah, just to kind of add to what we've been hearing, I mean, I think you and Karen did a great job this morning, and John just now of explaining just how cool this conference is, for lack of a better word. This has always, to me, been one of the best things that the NAIC does. I'd looked this morning, I went over the agenda, just went through it, and I was just so impressed with all the topics on the agenda. This is an agenda that has something for everybody, right? It starts with a lot of technical issues. You know, if you're a market analyst or a financial examiner or you do producer licensing, there's something for you. There's also a lot on the agenda that helps explain the strategic priorities that we laid out, that President Godfrey introduced at the beginning of the year, and we'll probably spend some time talking about that in the next hour or so. And then finally, and what really I think is interesting at the moment we're in right now, is just how it tackles and explores issues that not only impact regulators or the industry, but these are issues that intersect with the issues we're facing as a society, in our economy, in the financial markets, not only in our own state, not only in the country, but also abroad. And, you know, when you pick up the paper, so to speak, I'm an old guy, metaphorically, how often does it strike you? You know, we're kind of dealing with that at the NAIC, right? Or in our state. And that's what's great about this conference. I was talking to a staff person just recently, and she said what a great energy she saw when people were registering, a little different than a national meeting where we're always so busy. But it does give you the opportunity to really step away from your daily work and explore, you know, come together in Kansas City, collaborate with folks, but also just think about the big picture, right, that's being provided to you by a lot of great speakers. And really, your takeaway should be, how can I be part of that? How can I in my role, address some of these issues that we're all facing. So to me, it's always exciting to kind of take a deep breath, go through the next few days, and really just soak in all the knowledge and go back to your state and say, how can I be part of the solution?
Thanks, Commissioner White. And Director Dwyer, please.
Yeah, thanks. I completely agree with everything that John and Scott just said. I have 6 people here. I would point them out and embarrass them, but I can't see past the first row, so sorry. But I really appreciate that they were willing to travel. I think you get so much out of this conference, out of meeting people from other departments. Scott's department, for instance, is much larger than mine, and he's doing a lot on AI, and I've got a guy in my department participating with that. I know he's the laboring oar, but we really appreciate being able to steal stuff from him, right? And a lot of this is just meeting people and finding out what other departments are doing that might work in your day-to-day work that you probably wouldn't know about just from reading a book or sitting in the office. But anyway, I really appreciate you all being here, and I hope you get everything out of it that I think you will.
Yeah, thanks, Director Dwyer. I can't help but think, as you guys talked about, the opportunity that each of us have, although it's state-based, the opportunity to contribute nationally to the national conversation, to a national policy, even internationally, right? The policies that we develop here, we're the largest market in the world. John was talking about having over 10,000 regulators across the country, largest market in the world with trillions of dollars in premium. And so our voice needs to match that, the size. I don't know.
No, I think it's also important to put that into scope, right? I mean, the work that we're doing is really, really important. And the work that is being done at every department level is really, really important. You look at the agenda too. One thing I tell my staff all the time is that if there's something you're passionate about, we can probably find it within the insurance market that you can go take a deep dive on. I always need somebody on AI. I always need somebody on whatever the topic of du jour is. And if you want to go invest time and say, I want to become an expert in X, there will be a home for you in insurance. There'll be a home for you in the department, and we always need more of those experts and folks to lead on those pieces because, again, I often have this conversation with my federal counterparts at times, and this would not ever be replicated at a federal level, right? And just think of the consumer protection that we're able to provide at the state level and the engagement and, the regulation, all those pieces, and safeguarding the markets. There's a reason why the insurance industry has withstood, over 150 years, has withstood some pretty significant financial crises and challenges. It's because we know our markets at the very state-based level. And again, that isn't possible without integrated teams that are collaborating across multiple jurisdictions. And it's the NAIC that really allows us to bring that together. And so just the work we do is really, really critical. And even in North Dakota, sometimes we're a small state, we got a small staff. But again, we're participating on a national, we're participating on the international level, we're having those conversations, and the things that we are able to look at and kind of investigate can move the needle. And I just don't think that exists in really any other industry.
So you would say that the things that we're doing are actually securing tomorrow?
Some would say that, yeah, Gary, yeah.
So that just happens to be your theme?
Yeah, nice tie-in.
So that is your theme for your presidency this year. So in line with that, the NAIC as a body launched an initiative to modernize the risk-based capital, RBC. Maybe you could provide us a little bit of an update on the progress of the initiative thus far and where we are at this point in the year, if you would.
Sure. I think this is, we've kind of refocused how we're doing some of our priorities for the years, and that, thanks to Gary and some of the work that we've been able to collectively do as Gary's kind of onboarded over the last year as the CEO. And again, really looking at how do we really drive some things forward? And one of the things that I highlighted that we want to look at is our RBC system, which is really the gold standard, I believe, in solvency regulation. It is one of our fundamental tools that we use in the system to monitor and identify, kind of weakly capitalized companies. It's being used within the industry in some different ways, and making sure that we have a firm understanding of what that is in our system. Because I'll tell you, when you talk internationally, it's probably fairly misunderstood. I'd argue it's probably fairly misunderstood domestically at times too. And so taking this as an opportunity, one, not only to increase the knowledge base of the commissioners and the regulators across the country of just how critical a tool this is, but then also using it as an opportunity to modernize and go back. It's been in existence for 40 plus years. always good to kind of look backwards and at times do we're calling it a gap analysis to make sure that it's maintaining its usefulness and it's being used for the tool that it's meant to be used for. But then also as we go forward, the challenges that our financial regulators are going to face are going to continue to evolve. There's new investment products coming on all the time. Banks have stepped back in certain areas, which is going to lead to pressures in the insurance space to enter into. And just making sure that we as regulators are ready to adapt and have those conversations. It's certainly not about bringing irresponsible risk into the market. It's about being ready to have those conversations when we need to have them. And underlying it all, I think we have an awful lot of conversations about closing protection gaps and making sure that we're able to serve underserved markets and all those pieces. And that is all driven by capital. And so making sure our capital regulation and our capital system is as efficient and as principle-based as it possibly can be, focusing on that kind of equal capital for equal risk is really the underlying pieces. We've made a lot of progress. Big kudos go to Nathan Hodak, Commissioner from Wisconsin, Director French from Ohio, Director Wise, who I know is in the crowd. I've seen him a couple times as one of the vice chairs, and Commissioner Ullman from Iowa. That's the core group that's been leading the RBC Model Governance Task Force, and they've done a significant amount of work. We challenged them to get this done in a year. We're moving at not traditional NAIC speed, I guess, and they've done a fantastic job of developing some core level principles that have been released, and we're in discussions. We released them in July. We're releasing another draft soon, if not already. Again, to seek that feedback from the industry and make sure we're aligned where we need to be. And just again, I'm really impressed with the work that not only the A committee, the E committee, Commissioner Hodak, Director French, and everybody on those task force have done, because this is part of a longer going process, and Scott and Beth certainly know this with the investment framework and expanding and building that out and responding to some of the criticisms that we've seen over the last 5-10 years that we're either not doing enough, we're not evolving, and there's a lot of credit that goes to Scott and Beth and folks before me who have spent time on that E committee really developing that investment framework, and this is all kind of tying into that. And so it's funny, and Beth and Scott know this too, it's funny when you give the industry what they're asking for, they've been asking for it, and then all of a sudden, well, here's our plan, and we've been doing this for 3 years, it's kind of the next check mark. It's like, well, oh my God, you're moving too fast, I can't believe you're doing this, where's been the input? And it's like, well, all along the way, I can show you the emails that you've sent yourself, and here's the feedback you've given. So you're kind of one of those things where you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, but it's all part of the process. And I'm just been really impressed this year with the amount of work that we've been able to get done, and that goes to the collaboration that we show across jurisdictions.
Thanks, Mr. Godfrey. Director Dwyer, I'm curious, John has talked a lot about the conversations that we have nationally. I'm curious, I mean, your primary roles, each of you are lead insurance regulators for your respective states. I like to say that the NAIC is kind of the tie that binds each of us together, and that's through systems like SBS and SURF and the forums that the NAIC provides, like the summit today. I'm just kind of curious to get your take, Director Dwyer, on how does your work at the national level through our committee, NAIC committee structure, how does that impact your state, your consumers? And why is it important, do you think, for the states to be engaged, the states and the territories to be engaged in this national conversation?
Yeah, so I've actually been with the department for 25 years. I'm kind of amazed when I say that, but and I have seen such an evolution over that time. The reason that we're able to have state regulation is because we coordinate on our common issues through the NAIC. Without that, honestly, we would have 56 such diverse jurisdictions. It would be much too expensive. But we do agree on things. We agree on financial standards. We agree on other standards, financial being the one that we all really agree to through the accreditation program. But when the NAIC committees meet, we all put our 2 cents in. And I think that just makes a better product. When I think back about, and I've said this many, many times, but I'll say it again. In 2000, when I walked into the Rhode Island Insurance Division, it was a large room and there were offices on the perimeter. And in the center were the people that did producer licensing. And there were about 10 of them. And they had mailboxes next to themselves, those plastic cartons 2 or 3 high. And those were just hard copy producer applications. And we were the busiest phone line in the state because it took us 3 months. After you filed the application with us, it took us 3 months to get you licensed. It now takes 24 hours. And that's because of NIPR. And, you know, the NIPR team
Did Karen pay you for that?
Yeah, there's Karen. I can actually see Karen, so I have to say something nice. But it's a miracle, honestly. It was, you know, when you look at it in the context of the burden that was on industry and the cost that was being passed on to consumers that has really just been taken care of by NIPR. The efficiencies there, the lower costs, and the NAIC has allowed us to do that in many areas. You mentioned SURF. The other thing we had was cabinets of hard copy rate filings. We just got rid of like the last box. I had to sign off on the records request. But SURF was, again, another game changer. Everything comes in an electronic manner. There's back and forth with the company electronically. The Interstate Compact, we were all approving insurance forms that were exactly the same in North Dakota, Virginia, and Rhode Island, but we had 3 different people looking at them. The compact allows us to look at it once, and we all approve it. And I think John's the most recent member of the compact. Yep. But that's the kind of things, and the data, just the mere data that is available through eyesight, the data that is filed by insurance companies that we can then use in multiple ways, either through MCAS, which is the market conduct data that allows us to really look at companies and decide who we need to look at. So nobody wants to go out and just do blanket market conduct exams on everybody. That costs a lot of money. This data allows us to really target, okay, where are the potential problems for consumers? So, I mean, I could go on and I won't. Well, sometimes I do. As Gary said, we do talk a lot in Rhode Island. But you know, that's the kind of thing that has been so successful over the last couple decades, and I anticipate there are things I can't even imagine that we'll be able to accomplish through the NAIC in the next decade.
That's probably a pretty good segue into a question posed to you, Commissioner White. Before I do, as you're talking, Director White, about these systems that are created that bind each of us together, and just imagine trying to do that alone as a state, or the costs that are associated with these systems and the updates to these systems. And now as we're modernizing SURF, as we're looking at our enterprise data platform and FDR, like all of these things that we're doing to modernize our systems to make it more efficient for the collective, we could not do on our own, right? So it's a good testimony, and Karen thanks you, and we'll get you a drink later at the reception.
Can I have some chocolates?
Yeah. So Commissioner White, you know, we can't go a conversation these days without talking about artificial intelligence. You know, there are a number of sessions here on AI, including a keynote speaker that's tomorrow morning who will dive into how AI is reshaping the insurance industry. And I said earlier this morning, and I've said recently at a town hall, how at the NAIC internally we're thinking about how to make sure that we put the AI in NAIC, just our culture of innovation and to think differently and to be curious. And I'm curious to get your take, Commissioner White, on how you see regulation having the most impact on AI and its future in the sector.
Yeah, well, certainly AI, as you mentioned, this is one of the top issues we've been facing. I would kind of trace it back to 2017, 2018, when it landed and really hit the radar at the NAIC and got a lot of attention. In fact, it really got a lot of attention at this insurance summit. If I recall, this used to be more technology-driven. When I came in, there was a kind of a frothy exuberance around the industry and the capabilities of what AI was going to bring to the industry. You had all this venture capital pouring into the industry. Remember all the insurtechs that knew about their technology but nothing about regulation that we were dealing with. We were told that self-driving vehicles would be something we would all be accustomed to as we sat here today. I'm not sure all of that's turned out to be the case. You know, one thing we have done in that time, We've done a couple significant things. The first is we adopted principles to lay the foundation of how we were going to regulate AI systems, because we know it's coming. We can argue about whether it's come fast enough or what that might look like when it does really penetrate, but we know it's going to come and we have to be ready. I would say what we are seeing right now is not kind of a industry-wide application of a specific tool. You're seeing targeted applications. We've done surveys of the industry in the life, health, P&C sectors, and what we're finding is they use it for targeted reasons, and they're different tools. A lot of that's in fraud detection, as you might expect, or claims processing, but it's continuing to grow. I think where I would pay attention is how companies are managing and sharing data. That's really what we got to keep our eye on, and we're doing a lot of good work there. But you know, John Godfrey, President Godfrey, he was the driver behind establishing those principles. He talked about all the criticism he got afterwards, but now it's established that it was a brilliant job, John. And after that, you know, we've done other things, and the significant thing was the AI bulletin that you're all aware of that happened. I think it was a couple of years ago. This was led by Commissioner Bahrain from Maryland, and it was essentially requiring AI insurance companies to have a written policy or governance and risk management over the use of their AI systems. And so that was very important. We took a very deliberate approach over that. We decided not to do a model law. We decided to do a bulletin and make it not prescriptive, right? Because we knew we were dealing with everything from global insurers to your county mutuals. We made it risk-focused, principles-based, and we didn't want to put it in regulations because it might, you know, the industry or the innovation might move quicker than we could change the regulations. So it was very focused. It was based on NIST principles. Embedded in that was things that had worked in the past. We had a focus on third-party vendors, and that's something we're looking at. Use of third-party data is something we're really starting to look at more closely now. Essentially, I would say that the idea was when we come and knock on your door and ask you questions, you need to be able to answer them in terms of the governance structures around your company and risk management in terms of your use of AI systems. And I think it's a great next iteration of where we are. We've had about 24 states that have adopted it. We hope to get more in the coming year to also adopt it, but it's a good start. So where are we now? A lot of the work going on right now in Age Committee is in the Big Data and Artificial Intelligence Working Group. It is really standing up and operationalizing the AI bulletin itself. And what I mean by that is, you know, knocking on the door means having, when you do a market conduct examination, you're not just asking them about their claims, you're not just asking about their non-renewals, you're going in there and asking them questions about their use of AI systems based on what is in the AI bulletin, and also we're using the surveys as well to confirm how they're using it specifically. Virginia is one of those states that have already developed an AI examination tool. We're utilizing it in 2 current exams. I know there are other states, and there's been a model or a tool exposed at Big Data, and I think comments came in last Friday. A lot of robust discussion around that. We're going to get to a good tool, and I think in the next few years it's going to be utilized by most states. Other things we're looking at is potentially opening up for a new model law. That's gotten some discussion there as well. I think the idea there is, to the extent we do anything, it would be very targeted, but potentially address what folks have identified as potential gaps. Do we need a disclosure? Do we need a human-in-the-loop specific provision that may not be able tied to a specific provision in the bulletin? But there's a lot of good discussion going on, a lot of good engagement by industry and regulators. You know, I would encourage everybody. Everybody has AI systems by insurance companies that are going on in your state. We need a lot of states to be engaged and use your subject matter experts to contribute to the discussion, because really there's no more important work going on at the NAIC right now.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. I don't know if you know, there was a recent effort by federally. I don't know if you want to on a moratorium potentially. Oh yeah. I don't know if you want to touch briefly on just this, you know, thus far success of the NAIC in thwarting that. Yeah, there was there was a law proposed that would put a 10-year moratorium on any state law that attempted to regulate AI. Now,
they didn't think about, in the case of insurance, my favorite law of all time, the McCarran-Ferguson Act, and what that might mean for insurance regulation. But of course, it caused us concerns, and it led us to, through our Gerlich committee, to send a letter to congressmen explaining what the impact of this would be. I know NAIC staff met with representatives and their staff. We kind of flooded the zone and really made it clear that in the case of insurance regulation, we already have a robust regulatory framework. Any additional laws at a federal level would create problems for the industry. It would be redundant. It would be unnecessary, as these federal laws typically are. And what you saw was, I think that law was pulled, or that bill was pulled, and it's essentially gone away. We're not trying to claim total credit, but we did our part, right? We think it's good. We think we have a good policy in place, and we think there's a lot of good work going on. So that represents a successful effort to have a good story to tell, first of all, and to effectively communicate that to the stakeholders and legislators. So that was a good outcome.
Thanks, Commissioner White. Yeah, and John, to you on this, if you want to comment on that, I was just going to say it kind of highlights what we're able to highlight is the prudent approach that insurance regulators have taken with those steps periodically, right? Recognizing that we got to maintain some flexibility.
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to be kind of working in the space my entire time here. I raised my hand, I think, in the first couple meetings 9-10 years ago, and found myself as vice chair of the Innovation Technology Task Force. Didn't really know what that meant. And then all of a sudden, the chair of the committee retired, like 3 or 4 months into my tenure. And it's like, oh, okay. I'm the chair of the Innovation Technology Task Force now. That's awesome. I'm new. I don't know where the bathrooms are yet around the NAIC, but here we go. And it's been a spectrum, right? I mean, I think you start off hearing about AI or autonomous vehicles back then, and it's scary, right? It's like, oh, this is new. Oh my God, what are we going to do? We've got to regulate it. We got to get our arms around it. And we walk across the spectrum where we ended up with principles, and now we're into a bulletin, and we're probably going. And like Scott mentioned, there's some discussion around a targeted model law or model reg. And that's the natural progression of a lot of this technology talk. And I think sometimes we get criticized, I think, from industry, internal, external, wherever you want to say, saying, what are you guys doing with another model law or another model reg? Or why do you keep working on this? Or why do you keep doing this? It's to thwart the exact attempt that we saw in the federal bill to try to put a moratorium on this. We are able to then stand up and say, we've been working on this for over a decade. How about you talk to us about this? And maybe learn from us and look at what we've been doing at the state level with, again, our 10,000 plus state regulators and the work that we do through the NAIC. And that can really back some of that attention off. It's happening at the state level too. You're seeing a number of state laws that are coming in. We had one 2 sessions ago. God bless his heart, a legislator wanted to regulate the internet because he got an ad on his phone. He searched for shoes, and all of a sudden he got a Facebook ad saying you should buy some shoes, and he thought, oh my God, the privacy and all this stuff. And I'm like, I don't have time to explain cookies to you and what this means, but you're not going to get Mark Zuckerberg to come to North Dakota to defend Facebook. And if you do the law that you're thinking of, you're going to shut down our insurance industry. So can we just not? And so being able to have that backstop of the work to rely upon from my colleagues is, not everybody's an expert in every space, right? I mean, there are some folks who gravitate more towards the financial or the market or AI or technology, but I know I can go to Beth, I can go to Scott, I can go to my other regulator and say, oh my God, I got a legislator here who's doing this. What have we been doing on this space? What are we doing in this space? And they can give me a download, and I can talk intelligently about it, at least for a little while, and be able to kind of push back on some of these pieces. So again, the work that we're doing in the investigatory analysis and kind of the surveys or the sheer amount of volume of work that we're doing within the Age Committee and the Big Data and AI Working Group, not necessarily is always driving towards some sort of model reg, model law, or model something. It may, but at the same time, it's also helping us inform those conversations we have with other regulators or other entities that would love to preempt us. And again, it keeps us at the forefront of that discussion. So it's really, really important.
So maybe on the topic of working with the stakeholders that you have in the insurance space or across markets, and in this case, again, kind of some federal interplay here relative to healthcare costs. I mean, we've seen them continue to rise, right? And the concern from consumers, obviously, from regulators, adding to the rising costs. There's uncertainty about the extension of the enhanced tax credits that many individuals use to obtain health care. So if the federal government, in this case, Commissioner Godfrey, were to not extend those tax credits, what does the impact look like on individual markets? Could this also impact other markets? And kind of what is the work that you as state regulators are doing on this front?
Yeah, great, Gary. Thanks for the good question. It's going really well. No, I think this is one area where Scott mentioned we're able to remove the AI moratorium through some of our discussions with Congress and some of the leadership there. This has been one area that has been, I think, increasingly frustrating for just about everybody. I think I don't think I've met a commissioner who isn't supportive of the the premium tax credits and kind of continuing those, because they provide a foundation of support to the folks who are on the individual market. In North Dakota, that primarily is a lot of farmers and ranchers who are sole proprietors who don't get their insurance anywhere else. And so these enhanced tax credits have been absolutely critical in closing that coverage gap, right, and making sure these folks do have meaningful coverage, not only for them, but also for their families. And when you go through this discussion and, through the congressional budgetary process and some of this stuff, removing these tax credits at this time is a little bit like pulling the rug out from under folks, right? We've advocated for a glide path or continuation. This has been one issue that I think, again, has been unanimously accepted by every state, every commissioner that I've talked to. If there's somebody out there that doesn't agree, call me. We've reached out to Congress in January, in May, in July, just recently here again a couple weeks ago to talk about this. So this is one area that we have been very, very aggressive on. The problem is it's not something that's very well known or understood by, I say, our delegations. And insurance is not necessarily the top topic for them right now. And so now we're reaching the point where these rates are going to roll out, the markets are going to open up in November, and folks are going to have to go shop for their individual coverage, and they're going to see potentially anywhere from a 15 to 30 to 45% rate increase, and then also removing those subsidies. It's going to be a challenge. And I've had some very spirited discussions with a number of congressional offices on both sides of the aisle. Again, part of the great thing about the NAIC is the access we can get to have conversations. We met with both budget staff on both the House and the Senate when we were out there for our DC fly-in, and it was a fascinating conversation because everybody understands the issue, at least at the budgetary level, but it's nobody wants to pull the trigger. And so depending on what side of the aisle you're on, you don't want to disappoint the administration. The other side is looking for, well, we're going to use this as potentially an election tool in the midterm elections. And it's like, well, how about the consumer? Like they're the ones who are going to get harmed by this game, and what that means to their health care coverage and access. And so there's still some discussions going on in DC at the congressional level about maybe doing some short-term extensions or other kind of glide pathy issues. Again, the problem with that is, at least for North Dakota's example, our deadline was in August to get these rates in. So we're a little late. Not saying it's not impossible, but it's going to be a challenge, and that then leads into the other questions of uncompensated care, catastrophic care. Because if the healthy folks walk away from the health insurance market because I don't need it, I'm fine, I'm not going to pay this increase, and then all of a sudden you have a catastrophic event that probably could have been prevented maybe if you would have gone in a little bit more regularly. Or you've got the very sick population who, I absolutely need this, I'm going to buy this no matter what it costs because I'm facing cancer treatment, I'm facing whatever. That makes that risk pool significantly sicker, more expensive, and then everybody, it just trickles down the line. So it's a mess right now. This has been the one issue I think that we've spent more time on in DC than any of that I can remember. And we're starting to see some signs that, hey, people are understanding that this is really, really important. Boy, I wish I would have been back in May, but we're going to take whatever we can get when we can get it and try to, again, I feel like in this conversation, when I talk with my federal colleagues, I feel like the insurance commissioners across the country are the only ones who are standing out for the consumer, and that's part of our mandate, right? I mean, we're consumer protection. That's part of the things that we have to worry about. But it's just there's been fascinating conversations about where this all is going to land, and we're running out of time.
Yeah, really challenging issue. I do appreciate the way you couch it as the consumer protector here, and maybe we'll jump to something that's a little less local and national, but more international. And Director Dwyer, we'll start with you, and then over to Commissioner White, if we could, we engage and spend a lot of time on international efforts. I often, in my prior life, some of my friends would say, "Why is the insurance commissioner from Massachusetts in Switzerland?" Right? And then invariably after that, it was like, "You're an FBI agent, right?" That's just to be honest.
You wouldn't last a minute in the FBI.
It's probably true. So I'm just kind of curious to get your take, first, Director Dwyer. Why is it that we do this? What are the benefits that are derived from our engagement internationally, whether it's bilaterally or through the IIS?
So I get the same question from my husband. I have tried to explain it. He still doesn't understand. Ironically, one of the reasons it's so important what we're doing, and we really have to do it through the NAIC. The state of Rhode Island is not going to be engaging with Switzerland, right? But through the NAIC, collectively, the states can do this. Ironically, if you go back to Paul versus Virginia, I think was the original case, that established state-based insurance regulation, it was because regulation was a very local product back then. It was, fire policies. It was very locally based. By the 1930s, that had changed, and Southeastern Aviation Underwriters said, no, it is affecting commerce, and that's when we got the McCarran-Ferguson Act, which Commissioner White just referred to. But it's even more than that now. It really is a global market. If you're buying your insurance even from a little mutual in your state, they probably have reinsurance with someone who's not part of the United States. My largest domestic sells in the United States, but sells in 50 countries around the world. It's just a global market, and to really understand and protect the consumers, I think we really need to engage internationally. So what are we doing? We work with the International Association of Insurance Supervisors, which is a standard-setting organization. And honestly, we strongly push that our way of doing this has proven itself to be the best way to keep companies solvent at the lowest possible cost to consumers. You can always ask for more capital, but someone's going to pay for that, and it's going to be the consumer. So where's that sweet spot where the company is solvent and the consumer pays the lowest amount he or she can? We make sure that the international colleagues understand our position and our system, and acknowledge that it is a system that brings all of these benefits to insurance consumers. We also engage in supervisory cooperation with other countries. Once you've met and talked to the supervisor of the reinsurer of your mutual, you have a much better line with that person. You can ask questions when you're looking at the financials. We have a committee, the International Reinsurance Relations G Committee, where we hear all international issues and provide an open forum. We have international relationships with the IAS, as I mentioned. We also participate in the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, and the Sustainable Insurance Forum, the SIF. We have an international fellows program where we actually have people from other countries that work in insurance departments that come and spend, I think it's 12 weeks or 10 weeks with our departments. We, again, I'll mention, are very small. I don't know if I've mentioned that before, but anyway. And we had our first international fellow last summer, and it was a great experience. It did take a lot of resources from our department, but we learned as much from her as she learned from us. And we're now finding 20 years into this program that some of the top people in countries were once international fellows through the NAIC program, and we have a real connection with them. So Scott also does a lot of the international, so I thought we'd split the question. Maybe I'd turn it over for him.
Yeah, well, you covered it very well. One thing I was thinking about in terms of how to explain it, and I get the same question, by the way. The IAIS was formed in about 1994. I'm told it was modeled somewhat after the NAIC in terms of the structure. But they went along for a long time without really finding their footing or developing what is our purpose here. That all changed in 2008 with the great financial crisis. Of course, you had AIG as an insurer that was in the conversation about systemic risk. And then that's where they really found their footing, and they really got to work on developing a lot of new standards, guidelines that we've been dealing with ever since. Mostly supportive, but there have been a few issues along the way. As Beth said, we've had to assert the primacy of our own regulatory framework. They developed in 2009 or 10 the common framework of supervision of group-wide activities for what are called internationally active insurance groups, IIAGs, and so that was very important. A big component of that was to developing the group capital standard, the insurance capital standard that began, I think, in 2014. Gary knows because he fought this battle for many years. This was a 10-year battle where we had to explain that you weren't going to be able to develop one common group capital standard when it came to the United States, just given the difference with our markets in terms of our life insurance market and how we regulate having capital at the legal entity level and having less capital than maybe Solvency II, which is a European standard, and having more conservatism in our reserving and accounting. So this is a very complicated technical argument. But at the end of the day, they would have to acknowledge our system, and that became very challenging. And we were at the table and able to do that over the course of 10 years. It ended in Beth and Andy Mays and I traveled out to Basel last fall and sat around a table, and we were either going to walk out of there with a deal or we weren't. We were able to fashion an end conclusion where the aggregation method, which is our version, was considered the basis of the implementation of the ICS. So that's where we are today. It was a lot of negotiation. We'd formed a lot of important relationships to be able to have these tough conversations. Credit to Gary and Ryan Workman. But now we move on to the next phase, which is the implementation of the ICS. And so that's what we're going to be spending this year working on. The other thing I would mention is, going back to the great financial crisis, is we call it the holistic framework, which has this, what we call the global monitoring exercise. And that's meant to stay on top of the development and trends going on in the global insurance sector that could lead to systemic risk. So every year there's this annual assessment where they go out and do sector-wide data collection and analysis, insurance-wide. They look to see if there's concentration of potentially systemic risk. It's a very important exercise. They look at issues that you're going to be looking at next week. The three issues this year are the geoeconomic fragmentation and how that impacts insurance companies' liabilities and assets, private credit, which I've seen that on the agenda, and our favorite, adoption of AI systems by insurance companies, cyber risk, climate risk, everything we're dealing with. In fact, we're taking a lot of these issues are really most prominent in the U.S., so we need to be at the table when these discussions occur. We have folks like Commissioner Hodak and Commissioner Zimmerman and Commissioner Oman right now are in Singapore for our macro-prudential committee. It's a lot of travel, but the work's important. It's important to be there face-to-face, so we try to encourage a lot of continuously building that bench in the G committee, so it's important to stay engaged in the international activities as well.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner White. And I think that the sacrifice is certainly appreciated because it's extra. You know, when I first came to my first NAIC meeting, I remember thinking, like, my job was already busy enough, and then I came to my first NAIC meeting, I was like, oh, wow, I got a second job. And then I went to the IS, I got a third one now that includes this much travel. You know, when you guys are talking, because we're thinking about how, well, you know, how does that really impact us? And you guys have laid out, like, all the case for why, if we're not there, it's going to impact us. And as, you know, a former colleague and a friend of ours, the superintendent of Maine, Eric Chapa, used to say, if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu. So you better show up, right? So it's just the reason we show up to meetings like this to provide our input and skill set. For the same reason, showing up at the IAS to make sure that our voices are not just heard, but we're able to take it to a position that is good for our market. As John said, we've got almost 11,000 regulators working every single day to make sure that our market works as well as it does. So I am mindful of time. I know we've got a couple of questions left, but maybe what we do, I know you guys it was important to open it up. We have like 10 minutes, and if we have to come back to the questions, we can do that, but maybe what we'll do is we have about 10 minutes left. If there are folks that have questions for the three officers, we'll open up the floor.
And really not that scary. And if you got a really hard question for Scott, that'd be great. But no, I think we do want to hear what are we missing? What's on your mind? We get to talk about this stuff quite a lot, but I'd love to hear from what you all are interested in and what maybe we can answer and help. I can't see.
And we can't really see because the lights.
There's microphones in the centers of the aisles, if anyone's. We can only see 2 of the aisles. Boy.
Like, how proud are you, Commissioner Godfrey, of your Guinness Book of World Record?
Yeah, nothing's off the table.
We have the world's tallest politician here in the Guinness Book of World Records.
Huge deal, 2021 book. I'll be signing autographs later.
I hear it's the biggest deal, though, for your kids.
Oh, it's massive. Yeah. For those who don't know, I happen to be in the Guinness World Record for the world's tallest elected official. Massive deal for the 3rd and 4th grade classes in Bismarck, North Dakota. I can only imagine what my kids are saying to their friends and what kind of fights I'm getting into behind the scenes. But it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
So we do have a question from a virtual attendee.
Perfect.
How can closer coordination be accomplished between states?
I mean, I have the easy answer, the NAIC, but closer coordination. Go ahead. Does anybody want to?
Well, I think we're moving in that direction. So, again, 25 years ago, we all conducted our own financial exams. Now we're really coordinating by group. I know my people are spending a lot more time. And is it more difficult? It probably is. It's nice and easy to go into my little Rhode Island statutory company and do an exam. It's a little harder to coordinate with other groups, but is it more efficient? Yeah, it is more efficient. And I think it's a continuous improvement. We always have to keep in mind the great idea that we have, we really should check with others, see how it would work nationally. If we're going to impose something on a national company, other states are going to say, oh, why'd you do that? Or the company's going to say, why are you out of step? Maybe it's something you should discuss with a larger group.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? I think the zone structure helps. Right, meeting as a zone, discussing issues as a zone, bringing that back to the larger body.
Yeah, come to find out that we have issues in the Midwest zone sometimes that are a little bit nuanced, a little bit different depending on our population and our situations. But at the end of the day, again, I think the things that bubble up from the zones, generally everybody has similar problems, right? You may be more comfortable sharing them when you're zone members, but then all of a sudden it becomes a broader discussion. And I will say there's a home for every issue that we have that you can think of, I think, within the NAIC. I mean, through our committee structure, through the work that we do, I don't think there's a risk or a threat that wouldn't fit within the structure we have. And it's about continuing to monitor those pieces. And back on the international stuff a little bit is we're the world's largest market, right? And so we see a lot of these threats probably firsthand, almost immediately, right? And so I got to spend a week in Europe this last week talking to some of the international colleagues again about the GMAR and what that means and how we're responding as a system. And again, it's so comforting to be able to tell the story, the work that we're doing, especially compared to sometimes what other jurisdictions are doing. And it's like, oh yeah, well, we've been working on this for a decade. Well, welcome to the conversation. We'll share what we've been doing. But I think that not only provides protection to our system, but also the global system too. Because if there's failures globally, it will impact the U.S. system. And so again, the amount of sacrifice and time that the folks who travel internationally, and I'm through Gary and Commissioner Mays, trying to deepen the bench on the international forum. Our international team has been really, really good and really impactful. It allowed me to step back a little bit from being the international travel, which I think is a good thing, but it provides longevity for folks like Commissioner White, Director Dwyer, and those folks to be at that table longer, because the colleagues we're meeting with internationally, they've been at that table for 6, 7, 8 years. And so we were in a cycle where we were just kind of cycling through NAIC officers, and it's like, well, we just get to know you, and now you left. And now somebody else has got to come in and relearn everything, and it is complex. So, but I mean, again, the amount of sacrifices and other duty as assigned that a lot of the commissioners do on that international stage is super important, super appreciated, and it does help protect our system.
Yeah, and one of the maybe plug I'd put is, technology can help with our connection, right? The way we use technology. You think of NAIC Connect, and kudos to our member services team. Like, we're finding that space for everybody to live somewhere on there, right? So there's a way to connect regulator to regulator.
And there's so much out there, right? I mean, I think, again, the vast volumes of work that we've done in the past and going forward and ongoing, it all exists within NAIC Connect. It all exists within our NAIC website. And so if you haven't done it, if you're newer to the industry or newer to the regulatory scene, just going and playing around on the NAIC webpage and the NAIC Connect, I honestly find new things sometimes when I go on there. It's like, oh, I didn't know I could find this. Yeah, I do, yeah. But it's again, we've got a great wealth of resource out there, and being able to use that and connect with other regulators and other colleagues and ask those questions, because there's really no dumb question when it comes to insurance. And somebody's probably answered it, or at least looked at it.
Yeah, thanks.
One thing we don't bring up much, but I've found very valuable time, is the NAIC librarian and the library resources, which is outstanding. The NAIC has a great, if you really need some information, and they can go back historically. So I've had them pull reports from the 80s, so before you start thinking about an issue, you actually know, has anyone considered this before in another manner, and how can I, learn from that?
Yeah, that's a good point. And if you're ever we're in Kansas City now, but when you're able to visit the office, and on the 8th floor is the library itself, and Aaron can show you around, but you can go back to the minutes from 1871 and those first meetings. It's pretty fascinating to go back 155 years and think about those first people convening and creating this forum for us. So.
And, Aaron will actually come out or do a virtual presentation to your department on what's available. It's an area that a lot of people don't even know is there. And, if you contact the NAC, they could tell you what's there and how you could utilize it.
Thanks, Beth.
And it's also continued to evolve. I mean, you look at what we're doing with CIPR and some of the other data tools and analytic tools that we've got. These are things that I would have loved to have, 6 years ago. And now we're getting with Tableau, with some of these other analysis tools that we have at our fingertips, which helps give dashboards to a state like North Dakota, who, frankly, without the NAIC and some of the data resources they have, we wouldn't have the market intelligence that we need to effectively regulate. And so this is a constant evolution, and I know as a leadership team and as NAIC staff, we're putting resources into this because we see the future, we see where we need to go, and the responsiveness to have that data at our fingertips. So a big credit to Scott Morris and the IT team and everybody who's got to keep that up to date, because I think I understand about maybe a sliver's worth of the amount of work that probably goes into running those databases. But we use them as regulators to understand and answer questions and how to monitor and regulate our market.
Yeah, these, obviously pretty big capital expenditures, right? But they're investments in, doing the job better. You mentioned market intelligence. I don't know, Scott, if one of the questions I was going to ask you about was kind of the PCMI and the data that's been gathered from that, and how we've been able to use that. I know, like states like Oklahoma and how they've been able to do it. I don't know if you want to touch on that for a second.
Yeah, and I would just say I think that's been one of the success stories of the year, the work that's going on right there. And this is driven by the staff, the subject matter experts. There's a team. My understanding is this team has met every week, every Thursday, give or take, since August of 2004. It's about 40 to 60 regulators on that call. Eric Lowe and Sandra Darby lead it. But there's a lot of engagement, and they've created a great, we've already gotten one set of data in, and we're getting ready to do another one, I think, in the spring of 2026. But what do we do with this data that we have? What we have now is this nationwide, zip code level granular data that tells us a lot of stuff a state like Virginia didn't have before. You can use it for many different things. It gives you market-wide surveillance that you better understand your markets. You can use it like Virginia, where we did a presentation and talked about this tool to the legislators we knew were listening in and the media. A state like California can use it. They had the wildfires, when they can target where those complaints may be. I know CIPR has helped them with that. CIPR is really doing a lot of the work around helping build out this tool. You mentioned Oklahoma. I think they have a Strength in Oklahoma program. Where do we target this pilot program and get the most impact on this mitigation program? Any other cases, I think developing use cases is something they're focused on going forward. So that's an exciting win, I think, for the NAIC and the states who are participating in that.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner White. So I think we're right at about the time. But what I would just like to say is thanks to each of you for being willing to participate and come into Kansas City for a few days to be part of the summit. I think you guys have talked today about our coordination and collaboration and how that's made possible through this body. And I hope that folks out there have had a little bit of insight into kind of your own knowledge base and your experience, just how much each of you care deeply about the state-based system and your day-to-day tasks that you undergo. Like, we sometimes forget when we're in our own state the broader picture, but you guys don't. And as leaders of the organization, as a subset of the executive committee, your leadership is really important, and your thought leadership. So thanks to each of you. And I just ask the crowd to join me in thanking each of the officers for joining us today.